To the Point with your host, News Channel 5's Kelly Dunn.
Good morning and welcome on this, the last weekend before Tuesday's primary and what is turning into a campaign season full of surprises. Coming up, we'll be looking at the new poll numbers just out on the Republican race for governor and the Democratic race for Senate. Our roundtable will be analyzing the numbers. Plus, we'll have representatives from the Democratic and Republican parties joining us with their take on the primary and what they're expecting Tuesday. But first, News Channel 5's John Shainman with a report on how the candidates got to this point.
It wasn't that long ago that Governor Charlie Crist looked to be a shoo-in for the U.S. Senate. But then came the emergence of former Florida House Speaker Marco Rubio, and Crist changed his stripes from Republican to independent. Throw in a Democratic challenger in that mix, and the next U.S. Senator from Florida could be elected with barely one-third of the vote. The Democratic Senate primary race pits Congressman Kendrick Meek against Palm Beach billionaire businessman Jeff Green. Green's attack ad staked him to the early lead, but Meek, who brought in former President Bill Clinton this week, has rebounded in the polls. Another insider versus outsider matchup is in the Republican gubernatorial primary. Congressman Bill McCollum was down by double digits early to Naples healthcare magnate Rick Scott, but has since crawled out of that hole. McCollum called on one of his party's heavy hitters this week for support, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. I asked Marco Rubio, who called this a spirited campaign and hasn't taken sides in the primary, what the Republicans need to do next Wednesday.
We all have to come together because we're all fighting for the same cause, and that is to reclaim the things that have made America exceptional and make sure they're still there for our children.
The winner of that bitterly contested primary will likely take on current Chief Financial Officer Alex Sink, who's trying to become the first Democrat in more than a decade to serve in the governor's mansion. John Shainman, WPTV, News Channel 5.
And joining me now is Mark Siegel, the head of the Palm Beach County Democratic Party, and also Beth Kegel, the vice chair of the Republican Party in Palm Beach County. Thank you very much, both of you, for being with us today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, it's not your typical Florida primary. Let's all admit it. The campaign spending breaking records. We have a lot of unknowns who are making big splashes on the scene. And the real issue, the outsiders versus the insiders. Why this year? Why is this all happening this year?
You might trace it to Citizens United, which tried to legitimize the use of tremendous amounts of money in politics. And here you have two guys trying to prove that money is all you need.
What do you think, Beth?
Well, I think we're in a situation right now of economic unrest. I mean, people are frustrated. We had things come down from the federal government like the stimulus package, and that hasn't really translated as much into job growth as people had hoped. So what's happening is maybe there's this sentiment against really government in general that's driving some of this, and it's creating opportunities for people, as Mark mentioned, to be late entrants into these races and maybe take advantage with whatever personal wealth they have available to them to get into the race and have an impact.
And late entrance at the highest possible level. The idea that you should know something about government, how it works, what it's like to be in a legislative body or hold a government executive office, their thought is that doesn't matter. I'm new, I'm fresh, I know nothing, I have no experience. They're trying to sell that as a positive.
Well, they, of course, that we are talking about, the Republican Rick Scott and Democrat Jeff Green, and clearly tons of money and no political experience for either one of them. I mean, is this sitting well with voters, or was this part of the undecided issue that we've been seeing over the last, couple months with people just not being able to make up their minds yet because they don't know these guys?
Well, I think initially when they entered onto the scene that there were a great number of undecideds because it was something that, given a lot of the unrest that we're experiencing, that was worth taking a look. The differences that we have going on here is we have businessmen and we have people who have been involved with public service with open records that can be researched and vetted and looked at. And the voters are now having an opportunity to compare candidates and their records, whether it's public service or business record.
In addition, these guys having no records, Green and Scott having no records at all they can do is throw slime on their opponents and try to bring them down where the only choice is someone who hasn't been slimed. So that starts off well, and it's entertaining and attractive. Two guys are fighting in a bar, everybody's going to stand around and look. But after a certain point, it gets dull, and as the primary gets closer, the party people who are going to participate in the nominating process are just not going to stand for candidates who have nothing going for them.
Doesn't it hurt the parties, though? I mean, don't you think it hurts the Republican and Democratic parties to have... I mean, you know, obviously people have to be given a chance, and I don't think somebody who has no, you know, experience should be disqualified from entering a race. But, I mean, this is nasty stuff. Doesn't it help the independents out there?
Well, it more than helps the independents. It discredits the entire political system. If your prima facie case is everything government does is bad, and anyone who's spent their time working in public service is discredited by that, then what that does is undermine confidence in the entire idea that we can work together and achieve things. Neither of these guys, neither Green nor Scott, works and plays well with others. You have in McCollum and Meek folks who have gotten things done by working with people in the system. Here you have guys who have been nothing except the boss. One the boss of a corrupt healthcare company, the other the boss of just a securities operation that was happy to make money while everybody else crashed and burned.
Is that why we're seeing some of these endorsements early on, that sometimes the party leaders stay out of the primaries, but you've got Jeb Bush coming in backing Bill McCollum, you've got Bob Graham supporting Kendrick Meek? I mean, is that why we're seeing some of this, to kind of back up the guys who have served before and are kind of getting, you know, a bum rap because they've been in office and they are politicians?
Well, I think you may be seeing some of that, but I can tell you that I haven't personally spoken to Governor Bush about his endorsement. Obviously, his endorsement will weigh heavily on the minds of voters because he has so much credibility within the Republican Party. But again, I haven't spoken to him about it, but I have to believe that when he makes his endorsements, he looks at someone's record and what resonates with him, and if he sees differences among the candidates that are important enough, that he would step up and make an endorsement.
The Tea Party, Sarah Palin's endorsing Pam Bondi in the Republican Attorney General's race. Do you see the Tea Party having a big effect?
Well, I think with the Tea Party, certainly what they've done, I mean, they tend to be fiscal conservatives, as you've seen, and they have spin-offs. They have the 912 group.
Right.
They have DC Works for Us. But I think what you see with the Tea Party is they've really driven quite a bit of discussion about fiscal responsibility and accountability. And they have gotten the attention of candidates, and candidates have gone and spoken with them and answered the tough questions and also responded to their questionnaires. So I think from that standpoint, they have proven value, you know, to hold elected officials and candidates accountable for things like that.
But there's a certain style with which they do it, which is abusive and disrespectful, and it lowers the tone of the entire discussion. You can have the best point in the world, but if you put it across in a crude way that presumes that anyone who's worked for the public is evil and corrupt or somehow alien, that doesn't help anybody who's looking to the long-term health of America.
I would agree with you on that. What are you thinking about voter turnout? Traditionally on primaries, it's not usually that high. Is the negativity again this year going to affect people and keep them home?
Theoretically, the negativity will drive the turnout down. We'll see. I think we're both expecting a turnout of around 20% of our enrolled voters. And of course, it's important for every voter in Palm Beach County to remember that this is a general election when it comes to school board, when it comes to our judges. So it's not just party activists who need to turn out on Tuesday. It's voters who want to have a say in who their judges will be, who will represent them on the school board. There are a lot of crucial elections that are up this year.
Are you optimistic for next week?
Well, I would say, well, when you say optimistic, I know we'll have Republicans winning races on Tuesday. So from that perspective alone, that's optimistic. But I agree with Mark. I mean, typically, especially in gubernatorial primaries, the turnout isn't as great as we would like. Most of that is driven by the candidates themselves. A lot of voters aren't as familiar with the school board races and the fact that they take place at this particular point in time, which really is an unfortunate thing because our school boards and our school districts are so important. But I agree with Mark on that point. And I really, in all honesty, I really don't think the negativity is going to force voters away. I think the voters that are passionate are the ones that come to the polls on primary days, and I think they will continue to do so.
Hopefully you've helped to inform them, come on, get out there, vote, not just for the big names you see on TV, but everyone else who's running for office.
Want.
I think both of us are working very hard with our teams to make sure that we get a lot of people out to the polls on Tuesday.
All right, Mark Allen Siegel and Beth Kegel. The names are rhyming this weekend. Thank
Party
you.
harmony.
That's right. Oh, isn't that nice?
Right.
Kumbaya.
Thanks,
you
Kelly.
very much for being with us today. And coming up next, Alex Sink picks a running mate, but did she also snub the president? We'll have that in our newest poll numbers. Now for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Robert Watson, Brian Crowley, author of the Crowley Political Report, and our very own John Shainman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. Let's start with the governor's race in Florida. First, we have results of a new Mason-Dixon poll in the Republican primary. It was done Tuesday through Thursday. Now, when likely Republican primary voters were asked who they would vote for if the election were held today, 45% said Bill McCollum, 36% said Rick Scott, 15% undecided. When that poll's broken down into regions, McCollum's in the lead in the north, the central, and southeast Florida, and Scott leading in his home area of southwest. Now, just a week ago, McCollum had a 3-point lead. So now, quite a jump up.
Sure. Well, it's almost like there's been two campaigns. There's the campaign of last year all the way through to about 2-3 weeks ago, where people were rejecting all the incumbents, they were rejecting the establishment, and they were excited by these outside newcomers who were spending a lot of money, like Scott or Green. Now we're in the second phase. It's a second campaign. People are taking a closer look, and perhaps they're saying the devil we know is preferable to the devil we don't know. I don't think people like what they're seeing, and it's getting so negative. And in the past couple of days, there have been multiple stories against both Scott and Green, these outsiders, for ethical, scandalous type of... So it's raised a real question mark.
Well, and Rick Scott not even showing up for certain things. We had Thursday night, the forum. You were there, John.
On Thursday night, Boca Raton Republican Club having the forum. Rick Scott and Bill McCollum both in the brochure, both expected to speak. And essentially, Bill McCollum was given a free pass. He brought along some Republican Party star power, had Rudy Giuliani there. Rick Scott countered with his mother. Now, again, for some people, that may score points, but it gave McCollum an open forum to just sort of address the issues as he felt fit.
And that happened during a debate recently with him being a no-show Brian.
Yes, he's been a no-show at a lot of events, and I think that's hurting him. I think the other interesting aspect of this poll is that there are 15% undecided. That's half the number that it's been. This is the fewest number of undecideds we've had. That doesn't give Rick Scott a lot of people to move, and I think that he's going to have some magic this weekend and the next couple of days to pull this off.
I agree. That's why I think it's two separate campaigns. Right. People were not paying attention. They were attracted by something new, the outside, something shiny and new. But now people are paying attention. They don't like what they see. If there were 30% undecided, Scott, with his infinite amount of money, could attract them. But that pool is shrinking and shrinking. And these aren't even rookie mistakes he's making by not showing up. This is unheard of. Can you recall a situation where somebody sent their mother and just repeatedly didn't show up? This is unheard of.
Don't you think another interesting part of this, too, is that in a year that it was supposed to be the year of the outsider, it's the insider who's gaining traction.
Exactly. Yep. All right, let's talk about an insider. Democratic race for governor, Alex Sink, the front runner, was in the news twice this week, once publicly, the other kind of subtly. First, the not-so-subtle event. She selected former state senator Rod Smith to be her lieutenant governor. John, you covered that announcement. Why this week, before the primary?
Well, we asked her that very same question. She said she didn't want to be involved in a lieutenant governor selection after the primary. She wanted to get her team in place before the general election campaign really geared up, and she chose a gentleman to try to give the ticket a statewide appeal. Rod Smith, of course, up in Alachua County, has Palm Beach County ties, but made his name as a prosecutor and a former state senator there.
Yeah, does this translate into votes, do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't think it necessarily translates into a lot of votes. Running mates tend not to be much help. They're usually there not to do any harm. Rod Smith could be somewhat helpful in North Florida. He's a very charismatic guy. I spent a lot of time with him during the 2006 campaign when he ran for governor against Jim Davis, and he's a very good speaker. He's very charismatic. His rural upbringing it can be very appealing to a lot of folks. And,
might he outshine her as far as the public speaking goes,
absolutely.
actually?
Absolutely.
Well, I agree with John and Brian, and I don't think that the number two really brings a lot of votes, but it doesn't avoid a oops. She's not going to have have an oops moment. It makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. He is charismatic. She's been accused of being charismatically challenged, to say the least. He's a good campaigner. He's been through a gubernatorial race. One of the things about Sink that people are saying is, can she handle the rough and tumble this fall? She really hasn't been hit. The Republicans are going through a bloodbath on their side to her benefit. But Smith has been there. He did this just a few years ago, statewide. He was a state senator, which brings that legislative experience in. And he was known for working both sides of the aisle when he was in the state legislature.
It is kind of interesting, though, to have a person, man or woman, who ran for the top job to agree to be number 2 on the ticket. And it will be interesting to see how the two of them work together.
Real quickly, we'll see if it's an issue among you all. But the not-so-subtle event that kind of made news involving Alex Sink this week was when the president made a visit to Miami, and he's in a deli ordering a sandwich. Along with him is Kendrick Meek. No Alex Smith. Sink, excuse me, and she didn't meet him at the airport even. Didn't get up on the stage when he was there. What, is she distancing herself from him?
This is not the first time she's done this. Obama's numbers are not that, especially in North Florida, his numbers are not that strong. So she's trying to have her cake and eat it too. He raised a whole lot of money in the area. She'll benefit by some of that. He's going to get some Democrats excited. She's going to benefit by that. But she's distancing herself. Obama understands that. He knows the way the political game is paid. And I think it was probably a wise move on her part.
Well, this happened to Jeb Bush.
Well, in George W. Bush's, in his final term, he became as toxic as Obama is now, and Republicans didn't want to be seen campaigning with George W. Bush at that time. These things happen, and if Obama's numbers improve between now and November, they'll be standing on stage holding hands.
And she did try to do a little bit of damage control on Wednesday at the announcement. She did say that she had talked to Obama and some of his staff to talk about some issues affecting whether people in North Florida, Northwest Florida out in the Panhandle were getting the reparations from BP. And we also pressed on her, well, you had some words about Joe Biden when he made a speech in North, and she said, oh, it was a mischaracterization. I've patched things up with the vice president. So she's things have gotten things out of even keel.
Obama was magnanimous. He had good things to say about her. On the blogs, it's been funny lately. People are saying Obama might be back in the fall, but it might not be POTUS, the president. It might be FLOTUS, the First Lady of the United States, whose numbers are higher. Give us Michelle. Give us
on that note, we'll be back in a moment with the numbers in the U.S. Senate race coming up. We looked at the Republican governor's race. Now let's go to the Democratic Senate race. In the new Mason-Dixon poll of likely Democratic voters, the question was, who would you vote for if the election were held today? 42% said Kendrick Meek, 30% said Jeff Green, and 23% said they're still undecided. In this poll, Meek leads in Central, Southeast, and Southwest Florida. Green leads in North Florida. So, Brian, if you're advising Mr. Green, is there anything he can do between now and Tuesday?
He might want to start out by apologizing for the buffoonery he's had leading up to this point. This is what Democrats, I think, are upset about. I don't think this is an issue-driven thing. They don't know a lot about Kendrick Meek still. I think they know a little too much about Jeff Green. There's been a lot of, ugly stories about the activities on his yacht and activities in his business, and he just comes across as a bit of a buffoon in this election, frankly. And I don't think it's sitting well with Democratic voters.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's in trouble at this point because the two of them share the similar positions on the issues. So there's not a major series of issues they can say, here's where we're different on. So it's going to come down to character. And there's just too many questions about his character right now. And I was struck by, in terms of buffoonery and rookie mistakes, the same week that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the two biggest heavy hitters in the party, are down campaigning for Meek. There's calls going around in the area here from Star Jones. This is she calls and says, I'm friends with Jeff Green. If you're being accused for hanging out and partying with Heidi Fleiss, and Mike Tyson's in your wedding party, the last thing you need to do, I mean, can't you get Meryl Streep or Glenn Close? Star Jones, what are they thinking?
Again, are we talking insider versus outsider? I mean, you brought in Bill Clinton on Monday night. I talked to a lot of the voters out there, and you hit it right on the head. People still don't know about Kendrick Meek. I asked perhaps 12 to 15 people at this event. I said to them, are you here because of Bill Clinton or Kendrick Meek? 12 of the 15 said, I'm here for Bill Clinton. 2 said both. 1 person out of the 15 said, I came to hear what Kendrick Meek was all about. So, again, it might be, in this case, if Meek wins, success by association with sort of the Democrats' lone shining star on the national stage, if you will.
All right, we'll be right back with more after this. Time flies. We thank you for spending your morning with us on To The Point. Have a great day.